Let us talk about the budget, however, because that's what we're here to do. Working together, you should know the City Council and our administration have agreed on what we think is a fiscally responsible budget that does not raise taxes and that protects the core services that will allow us to continue growing our economy, improving our schools, and protecting our neighborhoods. This is a budget that will keep our city strong, but it is also a budget that faces fiscal realities. Across the city, families are struggling to recover from the national recession, and they're cutting back on expenses and finding savings wherever they can, and the same has to be true of city government. You should know that we've spent a lot of time in undertaking a comprehensive effort to make government operations more efficient, and we have saved billions of dollars in doing so over the last few years. We're also using some of the budget surpluses that we saved during the good times to reduce the need for cuts. At the same time, we're doing everything possible to make up for major cuts in funding by the state and federal governments. And I don't think we can overstate the difficulty that we've had to do that. We have been counting on the state and federal governments to help us all along. We will only ask for our fair share. I've said before, I don't think we got it, but we've had to learn to live with that, and we have. We have added over $2 billion in city taxpayer money to our educational budget to make up for the state cutting us $800 million and the federal government $850 million. And that is $2 billion that we could have used to spend on other city services or to cut taxes or some combination of the two. But without that money to spend on other city services, we've had to cut back and reduce the overall size of city government, and this budget does that. When we first came into office, city government had over 311,000 employees. By doing more with less and by making government more efficient and productive, we've cut that number to 296,000. And this budget will reduce the size of government even further through a combination of attrition and layoffs. I am, however, happy to say that those layoffs do not include a single teacher. By working with Mike Mulgrew and the UFT, we were able to achieve concessions that will help us avoid any teacher layoffs, which is great news for our 1.1 million school children and our teachers and principals as well. If you remember last May at the executive budget, we said we would try to work with every union to find ways to do more with less. The UFT, in all fairness, came through and did that, and Michael can describe what he did a little later. But basically, by eliminating teacher sabbaticals for 1 year and requiring teachers who do not have full-time assignments to serve as substitutes, that will save us nearly $60 million next year. Those concessions, combined with higher than expected levels of attrition, deeper cuts to non-classroom spending, and cuts to other agencies have allowed us to, for this year, avoid teacher layoffs. Savings teachers' jobs was particularly important to us because the state's last-in, first-out law preventing us from conducting layoffs based on merit still exists. We would have been forced to lay off some of our very best teachers while keeping others who perform at low levels, and that would have been terrible for the city's children. We've worked very hard to change that law in Albany, but unfortunately Albany has failed to act. We are making this budget announcement here at the Department of Education, partly because of the construction taking place at City Hall, but I think the setting is only appropriate because this budget devotes enormous resources to our schools, and it is an example of how labor unions can work with us to find savings that are good for the city and good for their overall membership. We had hoped to reduce or avoid layoffs in other agencies as well, but unfortunately other unions were not willing to find savings that would have allowed us to save some of those jobs. And so this budget includes layoffs in many agencies, but I will say there are no layoffs of uniformed police officers, firefighters, sanitation workers, or correction officers. Our final revenue numbers were within 0.25% of our 2-year projections, but that slight overage does amount to $170 million in net tax increases, and that has helped us to mitigate cuts and layoffs. And as difficult as these budget decisions are, most other governments are facing even deeper cuts than we are because they did not put money aside during the good times. Happy to say that working with the City Council and Speaker Quinn, we did save $6 billion over the last half a dozen years. We did not spend it all last year or this year, and will not spend it all in the coming fiscal year. This budget does preserve $2 billion in the Retirees Health Care Trust Fund we created because our health care costs continue to rise and because next year's budget will be even more difficult, and at least we go into that year having mitigated some of the problem. We are facing a $5 billion deficit for the fiscal year that starts July 1st, 2012. That is a year from and 2 weeks from now, and a week from now. And closing that gap is not going to be easy. But the fact that we are starting out with a $2 billion reserve to meet the deficit gives us some comfort that by working very hard in the next year, we will be okay a year from now. But it's all dependent on what happens to the economy and making sure that there are no unforeseen other expenses. I did want to thank Speaker Quinn, Finance Chairman Dominic Recchia, and the entire City Council for their commitment to preserving the Retiree Health Care Trust Fund and managing it responsibly. Speaker Quinn and the Council deserve enormous credit for helping us shape a budget that is fiscally responsible, and by working together, we have consistently produced budgets that have allowed us to cut crime and fire deaths to record lows, to raise graduation rates to record highs, and to weather the national recession better than most other cities. And this budget will allow us to keep making progress on all those fronts, while also providing more funding for child care slots, libraries, and social services. So I want to thank all the council members for their hard work on this budget and invite Speaker Quinn to say a few words. Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Let me first recognize my colleagues who are with me, the Chair of our Finance Committee, Dominic Recchia, Councilmember Steve Levin, Dan Halloran, our Minority Leader Jimmy Otto, Councilmember Vinnie Ignizio, Councilmember Eric Ulrich, Al Van, Karen Koslowitz, Mark Weprin, Jimmy Van Bramer, Margaret Chin, Sarah Gonzalez, Debbie Rose, Gail Brewer, Vinnie Gentili, Danny Drum looking casual, Adonis Rodriguez, Jessica Lappin, Melissa Mark Viverito, Fernando Cabrera, Dr. Matthew Eugene, Jimmy Vaca, Peter Koo, Diana Reyna, Lou Fidler, Brad Lander, Jamani Williams, Liz Crowley, our Majority Leader Joel Rivera, our Deputy Majority Leader Inez Dickens. I don't think I forgot anybody, did I? Nobody's hiding. Okay. First, let me start off by thanking first and foremost, and I'll do it again later, our Finance Committee Chair, Dominic Recchia, for all of his really, really terrific work. I want to thank all of the staff of the Finance Division for their work and the work they will do between now and our vote, but in particular, our Finance Director, Preston Niblack, and his first Deputy Chief of Staff, Jeff Rodas. I want to thank the Mayor. I want to thank the Mayor and his staff, Deputy Mayor Wolfson, Finance Director Mark Page, Chancellor Dennis Walcott, and Deputy Mayor Goldsmith for their work on this budget agreement with us. So I also want to thank my Chief of Staff, Chuck Mara, and my first Deputy Chief of Staff, Ramon Martinez, for their work as well. Even in these difficult fiscal times, New Yorkers expect all of us in government to protect the most vital services without putting our future economic stability at risk. Those New Yorkers can rest easy tonight, knowing that our children will still have the same number of great teachers, our seniors will still have great senior centers to visit, and our neighborhoods will still have great firehouses to keep them safe. I'm incredibly proud that the City Council, under the leadership of Finance Chair Dominic M. Recchia Jr., was able to do all of these registrations without dipping into the Healthcare Trust Fund for any additional resources. I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg and all of his staff and all of my colleagues for coming together to yet again make tough choices and to produce a budget that is both fiscally responsible and responds to the needs of real New Yorkers. Tonight's agreement for the framework of the fiscal year 2012 budget includes a plan to avert proposed teacher layoffs, prevent the closure of fire companies, and protect senior and child protective services. Thank you, Robert Jackson. The applause always goes up when Robert comes into the room, which is a good thing. The Council, working with Mayor Bloomberg, made preventing teacher layoffs a top priority during budget negotiations and successfully reached an agreement to save thousands of teachers from the chopping blocks. Thanks to the collaborative effort between the Teachers Union and its great leader, Michael Mulgrew, who we would not have tonight's agreement without, the Bloomberg administration and the Council, teachers are protected for the upcoming fiscal year. Nearly one-third of the cost of averting teacher layoffs will be self-funded by the United Federation of Teachers and concessions and agreements they have made in the budget. Further funding was found within the Department of Education through decreases in there and other budget agencies. Fulfilling our commitment to fiscal responsibility, as I said, the Council avoided any additional use of the city's health care trust fund beyond what was proposed in the executive budget. Additionally, the Council decreased its total amount in restorations to the budget by $10 million compared to fiscal year 2011. In order to preserve vital programs and services, the city identified extra revenues and recognized funds that have been allocated and we identified as not needed for fiscal year 2012. Existing senior centers, as well as 10 new innovative senior centers, will be fully funded. And while the Administration for Children's Services may face and probably will face layoff, working together, the Council and the Bloomberg administration restored funding to maintain the staffing level of experienced caseworkers, those on the front line of protecting the city's most vulnerable children. I want to mention a little bit about baselining and thank in particular Mark Page for his work in this area. Funding for several programs was successfully baselined in the agreement we've made in this budget, meaning future budget discussions about these programs will begin with a higher fixed level of funding. The Sexual Assault Response Team, SARTs, the district attorneys, senior centers, and our great city University of New York. In closing, I want to thank again all of my colleagues, but in particular also Mayor Bloomberg and his staff. We had tough choices to make. Thank goodness we managed the good financial times of this city well, so in making the choices we had to make for next year, we were in a much better place than we could have been in, a place that actually enables us to keep teachers in the classroom, keep firehouses and fire companies open, and do all that we can to keep child care available for low-income New Yorkers. This was a tough process, but I want to thank my colleagues for their patience, for their support, for their hard work and their open-mindedness, and I want to thank Mayor Bloomberg and his staff for all of their hard work with us on this issue. So thank you very much.